streaming now on Peacock.
We sell toilet tissue and local newspapers. That is in order of quality.
From the crew that brought you The Office.
My name is Ned Sampson. I am your new editor-in-chief.
Comes a new comedy series.
Have you read this paper?
It sucks. But we are going to make it better.
Meet the underdog journalists.
I hope it's not too disruptive to have me shake everything up.
Don't be so self-defecating.
With major issues.
Oscar. Oh, God. Not again.
The Paper, only on Peacock. Streaming now.
This episode is brought to you by FXX and Hulu. Futurama returns on September 15th, blending heartfelt moments with razor-sharp humor while accidentally saving the day. The Planet Express crew is back, defying gravity and common sense. From the creator of The Simpsons comes 10 new episodes where the romance is hotter, the threats are bigger, and the action hits harder. Don't miss the all-new season of Futurama returning September 15th at 8 p.m. Watch it on FXX or stream it on Hulu.
Unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hi, welcome. Happy Thursday. It's The Last Show. Here's what you're going to learn on tonight's program, he said, modulating his voice for no particular reason. Moving out of your parents' house and heading off to university is supposed to be a fresh start. New friends, new independence, and of course, new stress. But what if the way you were raised makes those stresses hit harder? Well, a new study says if you had overprotective parents, I'm looking at you, Mom, you might be more vulnerable to anxiety when you head off to live alone for the first time. But what does overprotective really mean? And how does it shape the way we handle stress as adults? Those questions we'll explore in about 10 minutes' time. After that, stories from the technology sector, including a new survey that says the majority of middle-income adults are not interested in using AI for financial advice. Would you let a robot tell you how to invest your money? That's some of what we'll cover and what you'll learn on tonight's program, but for now, let's dive in. And in important life-saving vaccines that address previously untreatable sexually transmitted infections news, and this is an important medical story, we go to Chief Sexually Transmitted Vaccine Infection Specialist Tony Five in London, England, who reports live from the scene of his apartment. Tony, this is a great story. A vaccine is now available to an STD that was decimating populations.
David, I have my nose to the ground with pharmaceutical developments, vaccine developments. Ever since polio was solved, I've always been on the cusp of everything, David. Now, a virus very close to my heart. You might know it as the herpes, the painful peas. I call it chlamydia, which is what I wanted to name my first daughter. They have developed, David, a single-dose vaccine. Okay?
Wait, I thought chlamydia was treatable. I thought if you got it, you could just take some antibiotics, go to the doctor, and you were fine.
You can, but this now, David, is a single-dose vaccine. The news came over. It changed my life, David. A single-dose vaccine for koala bears in Australia, for God's sake. Right?
I buried the lead.
Pharmaceutical companies are wasting their money, scientists' hard-earned work, on developing a vaccine for bears. Cuddly bears.
I bury the lead. This is not a chlamydia vaccine for people. It's a chlamydia vaccine for koalas. And while you might make a joke, chlamydia was like a serious problem for koala populations in Australia. Like it was threatening them, and they are adorable. I don't know how important they are for the food chain, but it's never good when an animal goes extinct.
Okay, 100%, I'm telling you. When someone told me this like a decade ago, I thought it was a joke. Koalas are, for people who don't know, a koala bear is like the national sort of animal of Australia, like a kangaroo. They hug trees, they eat eucalyptus leaves. But these little bears are little sexual freaks, my friend. They carry, they're the most carried virus of these animals. 70% of them have got it. Up to 70% have got this infection rates. They decimate these wonderful creatures. They can go blind. They can get UTIs, urinary tract infection, infertility, and in some very, very minor cases, they can die.
I'm reading that the chlamydia accounts for up to half of all wild koala deaths. So that's not a small number.
That's not. That's more than 10% and less than 52.
You're great at math, as always. You can treat koalas with antibiotics just like you can people, but that can also kill them. Also, individually finding out which koalas have it, giving them an antibiotic course, that's pretty invasive. This is just like one jab, one and go, and this could save the koala population of Australia.
In all fairness, the way they find out, seriously, how koalas have the chlamydia and these sexually transmitted diseases is that they're wearing usually Nike dunks and leather jackets and stuff. They go out a lot. It's those sort of outgoing type koalas that are in the nightclubs, the bars, that sort of thing that have got them. The ones that stay at home and listen to radio are absolutely fine, my friend.
This is why you're our chief sexually transmitted infection correspondent, because you only spew out facts. But the fact is,
government, David, sorry to interrupt, my friend, this is like breaking news. They've invested £37 million on this.
Which
37 million. And you know what? They do that and they can't give me a deodorant that smells like eucalyptus leaves. I do not understand what the world is coming to. They're resolving chlamydia for bears, yet Tony still has to have it as his Tinder name.
That is just rude any way you slice it. Which deodorant do you use? I used to use that hippie one that doesn't work, like Tom's of Maine, that contains none of the terrible ingredients everyone talks about.
Oh, God.
But I lived in San Francisco, which is a cool climate. It's like, I don't know, 14 degrees Celsius every night or like 65 degrees Fahrenheit or something. Now I'm in New York with the hot summers.
Yes.
And I was using my hippie deodorant and it just wasn't working. Finally, my girlfriend pulled me aside. She's like, David, you got to buy like the big brand stuff. And I've been less smelly ever since.
So I used to use, it was like a cliche joke when all the kids, they wear Lynx, which in your country, I believe is called Axe, which is like the generic, kid spray.
It's like the horrible spray for dudes who think they're cool and think they're slick, but not. Please don't tell me you wear it.
No, so I didn't. And then I had many occasions where, if I've told you this before, I leave my deodorant and my toiletries on my bedside table. But I also clean up a lot. I've got an OCD habit of trying to clean. So many an occasion I've woken up and sprayed furniture polish under my armpits and gone out. And it's been sort of lemon fresh, but with loads of friction. So my arms sort of swing around. So if you've ever sprayed sort of furniture polish on the floor, I have had that. So no, I wear some of the big brand stuff when I buy like a packet and they have a deodorant like Hugo Boss or whatever. I wear
Hugo Boss, fancy.
Hugo Boss.
And by the way, to rewind what I said, if Axe Body Spray happens to be a sponsor of this show or a station this show's on, what I was saying was for parody purposes, and it is by far my favorite product.
Thank you very much. And I wear you guys all the time. I don't know whether you have them there. Lynx Africa was one of the ones where if you were 16 and going on a first date, you would wear Lynx Africa and you would somehow think that it would attract the girls. Whereas they would be nauseous.
They're naming a spray after a continent? What does the continent smell like?
I don't know, but Lynx Africa was the famous one, man. If you guys out there want to Google it, Lynx Africa is the one. It's like the Old Spice of the previous generation.
I'm imagining a deodorant here in the U.S. just European flavored. It just smells like Europe. What is that, like trash in the River Thames?
Like Thames, like
Thames.
Axe England or like Axe Paris, like Gardenois type thing. Yeah, I can imagine that. That'd be fun.
Axe Paris just sounds like a smelly Frenchman on the metro or something like that. Tony, I don't want to talk about this too much, but it is the 24th anniversary of the tragic events of 9/11. And you were talking to me about it at the commercial break. A sad day, a horrible thing that happened. I remember being in school at the time. I'm 39. I think I was 14, I guess, or 15.
Yeah.
You were in the U.S., like trapped on planes during all that.
Dude, I was 23. It was my first American trip ever with my girlfriend, my younger girl. Well, she was 20, I was 23. And we went to Boston, and we had only gone from the Friday to a Monday because that's all we could afford. We were very young, and we stayed in a small hotel. And September 11th was my flight back at 9:20 in the morning. And as we were in the yellow cab going to the airport, the cabbie had on the radio and said, "Oh my God, a plane's hit the Trade Center," and it's, and I said, okay, wow. And then when we got close to the airport, a second one had hit. And I said, quite rightly at the time, we need to go back to the hotel. I don't think we're going to fly today, which we eventually did. And it was a no-fly for a week. We had the same hotel room that we did. And it was like the most horrific week of my life because it was like a ghost town.
Yeah, I imagine you didn't leave the hotel much. It was super scary. You didn't know when you could leave. What a weird thing to have happened to you.
Yeah, I was there, and one day I'll talk about the stuff I experienced there. It's very conspiracy theory based, but some of the stuff I saw was quite interesting.
All right, Tony, he's a conspiracy theory expert. He's a STDs that occurs in marsupials expert.
You can't say marsupial on air, David. You need to say self-pleasure.
I don't think that's the same thing. Tony, thanks for sharing, and I wish you well, and we'll hopefully see you tomorrow. And I love you, and you're our foreign correspondent and all that jazz.
David, have a wonderful day. In this crazy world, you're a slight bit of sanity.
That's the scary thing, really.
Yeah.
Coming up after the break, starting university is stressful for just about anyone, but a new study suggests it's especially tough for students raised by overprotective parents like you, Mom. So why does parenting style matter so much to students making this transition? We'll tell you up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
Where intellectual honesty gets witness protection from social prosecution. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Heading off to university, it can be exciting but also stressful, especially if you've got an overbearing mother. I'm thinking of you, Mom. A new study suggests that students raised by very protective parents may feel that stress of moving out more. They feel higher levels of anxiety during that transition from home to school. Let's discuss that with someone who's worked on this research, Dr. Anna Weinberg, who's a professor in the Department of Psychology at McGill University. Anna, welcome to the show.
David, thank you for having me.
It's one of those things that we all kind of know it when we see it, but it's hard to define. What exactly do psychologists mean when they say overprotective parenting? What are some of the features, if you can call them that?
Yeah, that's a really good question and one that we get a lot. So what we mean by overprotective parenting is parents who kind of broadly speaking limit their kids' autonomy. So that means like parents who can do things like intervening on kids' conflicts or interactions with teachers or other parents or other kids, but also trying to protect them from all different kinds of dangers out there in the world. And so it really involves doing a lot of things to kind of try to control your kids' environment and your kids' experiences and not allowing them the freedom to explore more and to, potentially fail more.
I feel personally attacked by that definition, but thank you for sharing it. Let's talk about when a student leaves a nest like that, so to speak, that transition to university. Is it a vulnerable time for anxiety, even with students who have ostensibly supportive families, but that might also be overprotective?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons that we chose this period is not because we're really interested specifically in undergraduate students, but because in my lab we study periods of increased stress or periods of vulnerability for the development of psychopathology. And so you have at any kind of major life transition point, people exciting things happen for people, but they also can become more vulnerable to develop things like anxiety or depression. And the transition to university for a lot of people is exactly that. It's a big life transition. You're making a huge number of changes all at the same time. So, you're changing your social group, you're changing the academic demands that you have. Many people are living away from home for the very first time. They have to navigate independence in a totally new way. So all of that is a huge opportunity for growth, but then some people will also suffer in those experiences.
And a change of standard of living. Like I only shared a bathroom with my brothers. All of a sudden I was sharing we had co-ed bathrooms. That's an adversarial bathroom environment.
We had co-ed bathrooms too back in like 1995. People talk about this now and I'm like, we've been doing this, man.
It's rude, okay? I should not have to share and you know what? I digress.
But you were sharing a bathroom with women.
I was. And I have IBS. I'm getting way off the mark.
Okay.
How does your team measure parenting style, stressors, anxiety? Like, I know we talk about this stuff generally a lot, and people throw around platitudes or non-rigorous findings, but how do you actually study this stuff?
So in this study, we used primarily self-report. Or actually, in this study, it was entirely self-report that we were publishing. So we had questionnaires that assessed symptoms in the past couple of weeks that people were experiencing. So it was asking things like, did you fear interacting with other people? Did you have sensations of kind of panicky sensations in your body? Or did you avoid a lot of things that you were kind of feeling afraid of? So that was how we assessed symptoms of anxiety. Then we also had a questionnaire that asked about experiences that you had. So are you fighting with roommates? Are you having trouble, figuring out how to eat or where to eat? So the stressors that are, that are included in this transition to university. And then we just asked questions about parents. Like, did your parents ever make you feel like you couldn't succeed if they weren't around, or that you couldn't navigate the world if they weren't around?
Wow. Again, feeling personally attacked. This link, though, so you found it. Why do you think it exists? I mean, I don't mind if you speculate here. Why does this link between overprotective parents and anxiety when kids leave the nests and go to school, why do you think it exists?
Yeah. So this study doesn't speak to that specifically. It doesn't, as you say, it doesn't get at the mechanisms, but we know from a lot of other research. So we know from working with anxious kids and anxious parents that parents who are overprotective are, by limiting their kids' autonomy, they are preventing their kids oftentimes from developing skills to deal with stressors and skills to deal with challenges in the world, right? So if you always jump in when a kid fails or when a kid has a problem with a friend and you solve it for them, then the kid doesn't learn how to do that on their own. So we often use like a metaphor of, parenting your kid to launch them into adulthood is, like taking them to the ocean. So going to the ocean is really great. It's really exciting and, and fun. And also the ocean can be dangerous. There's choppy waves, there's undertows, there's sharks sometimes. You don't want the first time your kid experiences water to be when they get thrown into the ocean. You want them to have lots and lots of safer experiences before that, where they learn how to navigate these potential problems. They learn how to swim with a flotation device, and then you take it off. That you practice those skills before you get to like the big time so that you can effectively navigate the ocean.
Not all overprotective parents are that way because they're just like, I don't know, not great people, or I don't know what the reason would be. Sometimes it's in response to a child being overly anxious and they're just trying to protect them.
Absolutely.
Like they don't want their child to take risks because when they do, they get highly anxious. So they're overbearing as a way to kind of protect their kids. This cause and effect that I'm kind of getting at before I mention this, that doesn't always exist. It's kind of tangled up, right? And what would you say to parents who are just being overprotective in response to an anxious kid in the first place?
Yeah. So I have worked clinically with parents of anxious children as well. And that is, you're absolutely right, that a lot of times parents, and I've just first to back up, most of the time it's not because parents are bad people. Most of the time, even overprotective parents who don't have anxious kids are doing that out of love. It's deep concern and affection for their kids. And they just, I'm a parent. It's hard to watch your kids be upset. And the same thing is true for parents of anxious kids. It's really hard to watch your child be distressed about anything. And if you always stop that distress before the kid learns how to deal with it, if you always say, okay, you don't have to be afraid of that, let's walk away from, the dog or the spider, then the kid never learns how to cope with feelings of fear or anxiety. And then they learn themselves to avoid, and they learn themselves that, oh, I'm not a person who can deal with these feelings or these emotions. So we talk to parents about tolerating their own distress in order to help their kids do it.
Interesting. There's kids that are going to be delivered to universities or college dorms this way. I mean, the problem is already there. Is there a role that universities or other kids at school can help with students that aren't as resilient because of overprotective parents? Like, assuming I end up in university with overprotecting parents, what changes could be made at that point to help me?
Yeah. So, we can't do much about parenting at that point, but what we can do about is how the kid is at that point. So the kid's own anxiety. And what we tell any anxious people who come into, for example, our clinic here at McGill is that it's never too late to learn those skills. So it's great to learn them earlier, but it's never too late to learn how to cope with anxiety or fear. We do this with 80-year-olds, we do this with 9-year-olds. So you can learn those things. It's sometimes a little bit harder when you're already deeply anxious, but we have really effective treatments. So, we can still help. And those are skills that you can learn like any other skill.
Looking ahead, what other questions you want to answer in this area? Or what would you like to see being looked into?
Yeah, so the primary research on a lab is actually looking at how kid and adolescent brains help us understand risk for anxiety and depression. So one of the things we've been looking at a lot recently is the effect of parenting on variability in how kids' brains function. So how how these parental behaviors can be embedded neurally and can be reflected in neural functioning, and then how that neural functioning can later predict anxiety and depression. But we're also working with some collaborators on developing parental interventions. So what can you do to help parents better tolerate distress and reduce their own feelings of anxiety around their kids? And will that have an effect on the kids' brain function and, of course, on the parental well-being?
And hopefully make them be less overbearing if they are in the first place.
Ideally, yeah.
Dr. Anna Weinberg is a professor in the Department of Psychology at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Anna, thank you for joining me. I've enjoyed the chat.
Thank you very much.
Up next, technology stories of the day, including a survey that suggests adults do not want AI giving them financial advice. You'd think a computer would make good recommendations of where to put your money, but not sure everyone agrees with that take. Details in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
We're building a wall between bad radio and good radio. And it's called The Last Show with David Cooper.
Oh, it is time for Technology Time, a redundantly named segment with my least redundant friend I've ever met, Carmi Levy, technology expert. Carmi, what a pleasure it is. It's been a while. Welcome back to the show.
It's an absolute pleasure. And from my desk here at the Department of Redundancy Department, I must say, I have missed you immensely. Immensely. There, I said it twice because that was redundant.
That is so sweet. You know, I was looking over some of these tech stories of the day, and this one kind of caught my eye, this idea that people are not interested in using AI for financial advice. I don't know if I'd want to use AI for like therapy advice, for life advice, for any kind of advice, but with financial advice, I do feel like large language models could kind of ingest statistics, numbers, look at stock charts and trends. I actually think financial advice from a robot that was well written, that explained how it got to its answer, might not actually be the worst thing, but most people don't agree with me there. And come to think of it, I probably wouldn't actually invest my money on AI advice at this time.
Yeah, I worry about the hallucination thing, right? We know that models get things wrong every once in a while, and the last thing I want is an AI financial bot telling me, giving me bad retirement advice, for example. So Primerica asked a bunch of its customers if they'd be interested in using AI tools for, financial stuff, budgeting, saving, investing, retirement planning. And about two-thirds, just over two-thirds, 68% said no, they don't want to use AI tools for this. They want to speak to an actual human being. And part of the sort of what's driving this is that it is, we know that the economic headwinds are growing, the clouds are gathering on the horizon, lots of bad news in the economy. And so as financial pressure grows, people are trusting technology less, and they want a trusted human being. And they don't have a problem, according to the data, if that financial advisor is using technology, including AI, to help inform their guidance. But they don't want to sit there and exclusively deal with a chatbot. They want a human being who's using technology intelligently. And so I think it's, we've been hearing these stories of people using chatbots for all sorts of things, like, I don't know, managing their mental health and managing their career. But when it comes to finance, as people get more nervous with their financial health, this data suggests that they are less likely, less willing to hand everything over to a bot, hand everything over to AI. They still want that human touch. I find that kind of interesting, sort of given where we're at with the economy.
There's a wider conversation here, a deeper one about like AI blame. I call it the autonomous car crash blame problem. Basically, if I told you autonomous driving cars, assume we live in a world where they're safe and widely used. Let's say they cause 100 times less traffic fatalities than drivers. What if an autonomous driving vehicle, hurt your kid, or even worse, awful, killed your kid? You'd have no one to blame. Like, we kind of, when a car crash happens, even if people behind the wheel are way less safe, we like to assign blame to them. And so am I going to be the parent who lost a child because of an algorithm, maybe a programmer's bug? I'd rather blame a person than I would a computer. And I think it's kind of true for financial advice. We'd rather blame an advisor who gave us bad advice than a robot. Like, if I lost all my money, even if trusting a financial advisor was a better move, if I lost all my money based on their advice and I have no one to blame, I might be like a little more angry. I might be willing to tolerate a little more risk so that if something happens, I have a person to blame. I wonder if that factors in. We want that human touch. We want someone to kind of take responsibility for our financial decisions.
I think it absolutely factors in. I mean, if you think about it, right, when things fall apart and you're in crisis and you're looking for help, what's the first thing you do? You want to talk to a human being. You used to call your advisor. You'd call the person who had done it for you. And yes, it does give us someone to blame. Kind of hard to blame a chatbot, but also it means somebody there who can help us navigate fixing all of that, all that has been lost. Whereas if you're dealing with exclusively with a bot, that isn't the case. Are you going to call up a bot when your portfolio is collapsing and ask the bot to fix it? I mean, it doesn't work that way. And so I think there's still room in all of this, sort of when the technology proves unable to keep up with the complexity of the job at hand, that you still want a human at the tiller. You still want a human saying, let's use this, and this tool. And yeah, maybe you can blame me, maybe you can sue me, but I'll still work with you to help you out. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are so frustrated when, for example, their flights get canceled and they call a toll-free number and they're on hold for 5-6 hours at a stretch because they want to speak to a human. And they get frustrated when they use a chatbot because the chatbot doesn't understand that they're sitting in the airport and they have no way home and doesn't have the ability to fix what is broken. And I think that really is the problem. We're still at version 1.0 of AI. It's just not good enough to replace humans. And I think research like this suggests that we're finally getting the message, maybe, and maybe organizations, maybe financial services organizations or any other organization that has a public-facing component, they might want to consider not getting rid of their customer service agents, not getting rid of their advisors, not getting rid of their humans as a result.
I am sometimes referred to by at least one of my friends as David Cupertino. So let's go to David Cupertino to, I don't even know what you call it, the Apple event, the iPhone Air event, the Apple happening. What is this conference or announcement event? What do you even call it?
I think I was having difficulty with that as well because I was trying to slug all of the stories that I was writing about it. An Apple event seems to be the thing, and it really is the annual September event where Apple unveils its iPhones and similarly related devices, like the new iPhones, the new Apple Watches, the new AirPods, whatever the new devices are going to be for the year. But really, it is the iPhone event, and this was iPhone's turn, and of course they are better than any iPhone that came before it.
Of course, this changes everything again. But
that's, and of course, Apple wants you to believe that, just like Google did when they introduced their Pixel 10 in August, when Samsung was introducing their S26. Like, this is just the way the industry works. But so there's no doubt that it's the best device ever that they've released. The question is it sufficiently better? Has the delta, has the bar been moved enough between last year and this year for everyone to drop whatever they're using now and buy new? And every year I struggle with this because there's an industry that wants us to buy a new phone every year, and not just a phone, but all the other devices, the watches, the headphones, the accessories, the tablets, the laptops that go along with it, which is essentially a mortgage payment. And then there's the reality, especially as the economy continues to tank, where I'm sorry, but my monthly budget does not really allow for me to replace these devices every year. And so, I mean, at some point, you sort of have to look at this as a heck of a lot of hype, and maybe you want to dial back from it. My phone still works. The battery still lasts the day. Do I really need a new one? Probably not. Would I like a new one? Of course.
Sure.
Do I want to brag about it to my friend? Sure.
Oh, come on, your friend. If you are hanging around people who are impressed that you have the iPhone 25, that's not you need new friends.
Then they're not my friends. Then they're absolutely not my friends. But it's still a thing. Watching how they, especially the new one, the iPhone Air, the super thin one, it's as thick as 3/4. I mean, it looks really cool. It was peak Apple.
My 13 mini is still allegedly smaller than this Air, and I will not upgrade because I want a small phone, and Apple hasn't made a small phone since the 13. But yesterday I was bashing the event because it just seemed like bells and whistles, better camera, lighter, slightly longer battery, nothing paradigm shifting. But at the commercial break, you were telling me some of the software Apple has going on is what's cool. And I kind of omitted that when we talked about the event yesterday. So tell me a little bit about the software, and then we'll go more into it after the break.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really care about hardware and specs because that's a nerd thing. And yes, I'm a nerd, but when I explain it to, say, my mom, she doesn't care. It's what does it mean for me? My mom has issues with her hearing, right? So the hearing, as the AirPod Pro 3 as a hearing aid is a phenomenal mainstream affordable tool for, $300 or so bucks. You can have a device that, gives you a good chunk of what regular hearing aids would do for a lot less money. And so that is game-changing technology. A watch that can detect variations in my heart rate and alert me that I should probably get to the ER. That's a really big deal. They played a video at the event of somebody whose Apple Watch warned him that he was having a stroke, and he made it to the hospital in time, and he made a full recovery. And as a stroke victim myself, that resonates really strongly. These are game-changing capabilities, all made possible by, of course, very good hardware, but also the software that runs on top of it that's increasingly being tuned to save lives.
We're here with Carmi Levy, technology expert. We're talking Apple's event, and when we come back, we'll talk about how Google has admitted that the open web, we'll tell you what that is in a second, is in rapid decline. Is the internet going to be dead because of AI in a few years? That is what we'll find out here on It's Time for Technology, when the time for that continues after the break time.
Go all in on fall with Abercrombie Kids. Their newest drop of on-trend outfits are ready for everything, from the bus stop to family bonfires. And it wouldn't be fall without football. Gear up the kids with officially licensed NFL tees and sweatshirts. Shop Abercrombie Kids this season in the app, online, and in-store.
Cooper's Law tells us that the complexity of a relationship is inversely proportional to its explanation. You're listening to The Last Show with David Cooper.
It is time for Technology Time. We are joined by Carmi Levy, technology expert. He said very quickly into his microphone, we are talking the Apple event. I love that this thing kind of doesn't have a name. Only Apple would throw this big fanfare thing where they announce products and not actually name their conference. Or maybe they did name it, but it's pretty ambiguous.
They're Apple. They don't need to. They kind of make the rules as they go along, right?
For me, the classic example of Apple pretending that they invented everything is when they launched their AI product. They called it Apple Intelligence, and the acronym is AI. So in some sense, they're like, AI means Apple Intelligence, not artificial intelligence, because we invented everything, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting because they didn't really talk about Apple Intelligence a whole lot at this event. They kind of dialed it back. And for a lot of people, that was telling. They made a big fanfare of it last year, but they've stumbled a little bit.
I don't even know what it does, Carmi. I have it on my computer. I have no idea what it does.
And that's the thing is a lot of the features have still not been released. So for example, it was going to make Siri a lot smarter, make her a lot more conversational. That has been delayed into next year. They have introduced things like Fitness Buddy so that if you have an Apple Watch, as you're running, for example, it'll coach you right in your ear if you're wearing your AirPods, and it'll tell you about how you're doing and sort of share information with you. So we're starting to see little bits and pieces of it. The live translation feature with AirPods as well, also powered by Apple Intelligence kind of in the background. So we're seeing little bits and pieces of it, but certainly not to the same degree that, we're seeing with OpenAI or Google or Microsoft Microsoft or Amazon, and there are a lot. Then it's one of the reasons why the share value is, not as strong as it probably could be. It went down after the event. A lot of people are saying Apple needs to push a little bit harder on AI, move a little bit faster, or risk being left behind.
Now, the Apple Watch, I always find these things so invasive. Like, I already have enough notifications coming in. I don't want to see every text message, every weather report, every news article, every stupid video, every match on a dating app on my wrist. When I'm with a friend and they glance at their Apple Watch wrist as we're talking, I'm like, you need to get a life. But people love these products. And there's a new, rather accessible Apple Watch on the market, which I guess we should talk about. Have I really sold it well? Probably not.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So it's called the Apple Watch SE, and it's always been sort of the cheaper option for somebody who wants an Apple Watch but doesn't want to spend the full price on it. And so, but the problem with previous versions of the SE has been it's really been sort of a compromised device. No always on display, always had an older chip in it, so a lot of the newer features weren't accessible, didn't have a speaker. Whereas this one, they gave it the new chip known as the S10. They gave it an always on display. They gave it a speaker. It has temperature sensors, so you can use it for more healthcare functions, ovulation tracking, things like that. And so it's much closer to the full-on Apple Watch Series 11 than it used to be. And you're not giving up as much just because you want to save a couple $100 when you buy an Apple Watch. It also has 5G support, like the rest of the Apple Watch line as well. So for a lot of people, this could open up the Apple Watch kind of experience to folks who might have wanted one but didn't want to spend the freight. And then for the regular Apple Watch, the marquee feature here, this thing's been around for 10 years and it's always had 18 hours of rated battery life, which for a lot of folks, including me, not enough. Well, they finally bumped that up to 24. Is that still enough? Still sufficient? No, because quite frankly, if I'm charging my device every single day, it means I'm probably not sleeping with it. So that to me is a loss. I think it's an opportunity. Other manufacturers like Garmin have devices that go for days, if not weeks, on a charge. You would think that Apple could figure that out by now. But, any improvement is worth it. And I think that's something the industry needs to recognize. We're sick and tired of charging our devices constantly sort of asking ourselves, how much do I still have? Where's the wall outlet? Where's my charger? I don't want to have to care and feed or babysit my devices like that. Longer battery life will go a long way toward addressing it. We're finally starting to very slowly move in the right direction.
All right, let's move to Google. A recent court filing, I believe, where they kind of admit that the open web is in decline. What does that mean? When we say open web, how would we define that?
So, open up a browser, visit a website, or do a Google search, and it spits back a bunch of links and serves up a bunch of ads alongside that. The very model of how the web works, Google was instrumental in defining it. That's how money is made. That's how the entire machine is greased. And so Google, of course, as the industry switches toward artificial intelligence, if you use a chatbot to get your answers, you're probably not surfing the web. You're probably not using Google search. You're probably not clicking on those links and generating advertising revenues for someone. And so for months, Google has been saying, well, AI is not killing the web. We're fine. And yet now in this lawsuit, they were sued successfully by the U.S. Department of Justice over their search ad business a few years back. They were ruled a monopoly. Now they're figuring out what the penalty should be. And Google, in one of its filings, actually said that the web is not thriving, that artificial intelligence is causing traffic to go down, that it's affecting the very economics of the way the open internet works, which has huge economic implications for not only companies like Google and others, but all of us, because sort of the services that we take for granted, maybe Google search at some point won't be economically viable because of this. We may have to pay for it. Who knows? But it means something is changing, all thanks to AI.
There's overlap here with this idea of the dead internet, and that's an internet that uses AI to generate all of it, and then AI to ingest the AI-generated internet and generate more AI slop, and we just end up with a horrible internet that's kind of unusable. You can't trust whether anything was posted by a person or a robot, where Google search doesn't really do a good job. The kind of internet as we know it, from the day kind of ChatGPT launched with fanfare to some eventual point, will kind of be unusable. Google won't be able to make profits off of any kind of search ad revenue. And it just feels like this is one step towards that.
I think we're definitely headed in that direction. Certainly the value of social media platforms has gone down as this reality has become more so. For example, a large percentage, over 50% of long form posts to LinkedIn, for example, are AI generated, known as AI slop. I made the mistake of looking at my Facebook feed this morning, and by my anecdotal measurement, 90% of the content there was AI generated garbage. And so as AI increasingly proliferates and sort of becomes the content that we encounter online, and then that becomes, as you explained, the basis for training future AI, and AI essentially feeds on itself, well, the value to you and me and all of our listeners continues to decline. And so, yeah, this sort of dystopian future where the AI internet becomes a place nobody really wants to be, I think is arriving, or it's coming at us a lot faster than it was even a year ago. And I think that's problematic. And Google admitting that, yeah, the traditional web is heading in the wrong direction, I think that's something we should all pay attention to. And I think we all have to become better at recognizing when we're reading something that's AI, and maybe, not interacting with it or deliberately looking for human-based sources of content, not AI-based ones.
I see room for like a closed, tighter internet. Maybe it's social networks, maybe it's search, maybe it's news websites, maybe it's a Twitter-like thing. But I see room for an internet where you just have access to people who you trust that wouldn't be robots. Like, I remember when Facebook, you just see what your friends posted. Now there's been an effort on the feed to like open it up so you see general news, you see the kind of content you might want to see, discoverability. But in that new kind of format of the last 10 years, 8 years, who knows when they change the timeline, there's a lot of room for AI-generated content. But I see room or space for some sort of social network where people you only trust are posting things. Like, I only have your account, Carmi. I'm not going to see some rando's AI slop like you might on LinkedIn or Facebook today. I don't know if this network is going to exist, but I would like to see something like that. And if you out there listening can build it, there's your $1 billion right there. You're welcome.
The term that often comes to mind when I think of that is walled garden. And the internet in the early days, I mean, that's what AOL, America Online, felt like in those early days. And you paid for it, of course, but it was a walled garden. It was enclosed, and you did have fairly solid control over who you interacted with and what content you accessed and or shared. We've lost that, certainly, as algorithms have become the driving force of what we see when we go online. And I think much of it is to the detriment. So, yeah, absolutely. Anyone out there who wants to code something like that, I would be your first beta tester.
Carmi Levy, technology expert based out of London, Ontario, Canada. I appreciate you coming on. Always a pleasure, my friend.
I appreciate being with you. Thanks so much, David.
50 years ago, NASA went to Mars hunting for life. After the break, we ask, did scientists actually find it and just not realize? I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Routine, adjective. Used to describe an individual whose spirit is unyielding, unconstrained, one who navigates life on their own terms, effortlessly. They do not always show up on time, but when they arrive, you notice an individual confident in their contradictions. They know the rules, but behave as if they do not exist. Routine, the new fragrance by Miu Miu, defined by you.
Keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
50 years ago, NASA sent 2 spacecraft to Mars, not just to take pictures or to study the weather, but to answer humanity's biggest question: are we alone in the cosmos? They were the Viking missions, and they made history, and their search for life still sparks debate among specialists today. I am joined by research professor in applied science at William & Mary, Dr. Joel S. Levine, to discuss. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So walk me through what happened 50 years ago with these Viking missions. Tell me about them. What did they seek to discover, and what were they doing?
Right. Well, let me first say that there were 2 Viking spacecraft launched in the summer of 1975. Each spacecraft consisted of 2 components. The first component was an orbiting spacecraft that remained in orbit around Mars. And traveling around Mars at several hundred miles above the surface. It took pictures and made measurements. But the most interesting part of the mission was on radio command from Earth. That orbiting spacecraft released a lander. The lander traversed through the atmosphere, and it landed 7 minutes later on the surface of Mars. Now, that landing on the surface of Mars of Viking 1 lander and Viking 2 lander was in 1976, and those two landers became the first two spacecraft in the history of the human race to successfully land on the surface of another planet as operational and working spacecraft. In addition, both Viking landers, Viking Lander 1 and Viking Lander 2, had 3 experiments to look for active life on the surface of Mars, microbial life on the surface of Mars. And this is the first time in human history that we look for life on another planet. And that was 50 years ago or 49 years ago that they landed. But since then, we have not sent any spacecraft to Mars, not NASA, not any country, to look for active life on the surface of Mars. So Viking was unique, being the first successful soft landings and the first mission to ever look for active life, microorganisms on the surface of Mars.
It must have been pretty exciting at the time, this feeling that the folks working on it were at the edge of discovering life. Was it more of a cautious and skeptical approach, or were folks convinced they would find something?
I think it was very cautious and very skeptical. And in fact, the results were very ambiguous. There were 3 experiments on looking for life, 3 different biology experiments on the lander, and one experiment gave a positive result suggesting there may be microbial life on Mars. The other 2 experiments gave negative results. Now, what's so interesting, this was 49 years ago. People have analyzed and reanalyzed and debated the results. And a few years ago, a professor in Florida named Dr. Stephen Benner looked at the Viking data, looked at the original data, and concluded that, yes, we discovered microbial life on Mars 49 years ago. Even though the official Viking, the Vikings' conclusion was there's no life because 2 of the experiments gave negative results, we now know why they gave negative results. It had to do with the soil on Mars, something that we didn't know much about 49 years ago. And we now believe, and Dr. Benner believes, that there is life on the surface of Mars, and he can explain the measurements in terms of a form of microorganism on the surface of Mars.
Tell me more about those positive results. What might we have discovered? How do we have those signs of life? What is it exactly?
Well, in the Viking biology experiment called the labeled release experiment, they brought a soil sample from the outside of Mars on a remote shovel that was on a big stick, brought the sample of the soil of Mars into the spacecraft lander in a sterilized chamber. And once the soil was delivered, the soil was exposed to a nutrient, some food that if there was life, the life could use for nutrition and actually use the material in the nutrient. But what we did, or what NASA did, was put radioactive carbon, the atom carbon, as part of the nutrient. And there was a monitor in the chamber to see if we could measure radioactive carbon dioxide. Because if this radioactive carbon was in fact used as the food by microorganisms on Mars, as a metabolic byproduct, it would produce carbon dioxide. But if it ate the food that we put in there, it was radioactive. The metabolic gas given off is radioactive carbon dioxide. And sure enough, that's what we observed. We observed the buildup of radioactive carbon dioxide, strongly suggesting that there was some microorganisms in the soil sample that ingested the radioactive carbon and as a metabolic byproduct produced carbon dioxide, which it turned out was radioactive because the food was radioactive. So that was very, very exciting. Now, the other two experiments worked on similar processes. What we did is, under different conditions, we brought soil into the lander spacecraft. We had water, we had no water, we had different nutrients, and they did not give the results that would suggest living microorganisms were active in that soil. But we now know that the soil on Mars, unlike the soil on Earth, is very chemically reactive. And because of the high reactivity of the soil, the results that we got in the other two experiments did not give us a positive indication that there were microorganisms on the surface of Mars. Now, over the last 49 years, since Viking Lander made these measurements, we've learned more about the soil. In fact, in 2008, a spacecraft called Phoenix, launched by NASA, discovered something very interesting, that in the soil of Mars, there is a very strongly chemically reactive gas called chlorate. And we now think that it was the chlorate in the soil of Mars that inhibited the process for the other two experiments. And so we've re-examined the data, and more recently, Dr. Stephen Benner has taken the Viking results and has come up with an explanation and a model for life being present, microorganisms on the surface of Mars.
What would you like to see next for us to conclusively say there's life on Mars, for us to crack out the champagne and say we're not alone in the cosmos, at least in terms of microbial bacteria and stuff? What experiment would you like to see next?
Well, what experiment I'd like to see next is something that would be more straightforward. We have plans at NASA to send a human mission to Mars. A human mission may be as early as 2035, a crew of 4 people. And the number one objective of that mission will be to search for life on Mars and either confirm or disprove the Viking results. It's a trip that will cover over 200 million miles one way and take 8 months. And NASA is now planning to do this mission. And the search for life on Mars, the search for life outside the Earth, is a unique and a very important question, one that has implications not only in planetary science, but in almost every area of human endeavor.
Joel, thanks for talking to me today about this kind of exciting stuff, and it's really interesting to revisit these results from so long ago. I appreciate your time.
I thank you, David.
Dr. Joel S. Levine is a research professor in applied science at William and Mary. Coming up next, whether you realize it or not, AI is being used in certain courtrooms. Can we trust it, or are we turning criminal justice into a black box? I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
If you thought goldenly breaded McDonald's chicken couldn't get more golden, think Golder! Because new sweet and smoky special edition gold sauce is here. Made for your chicken favorites.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
When your therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always The Last Show with David Cooper.
Artificial intelligence seems to be creeping into the justice system, from predicting crime to recommending sentences. Should we trust robots to profile your likeliness to commit a crime? Should AI be helping us sentence those who are guilty? Should we trust this black box to weigh on life and liberty? I'm here with a researcher studying fairness and transparency in AI in the courts. He's a professor at the Santa Fe Institute. His name is Cris Moore. Cris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
When I read a summary of some of your work, the first thing that came to mind was that movie Minority Report. Is that the future we're going to be in, where robots are deciding whether we'll commit crimes before we commit them?
Minority Report is great science fiction. There's also, if you've ever seen the TV show Person of Interest, in that there's a vast computer which says things like 97% chance of a violent confrontation. But the reality is that crime is very difficult to predict. It involves a lot of chance and a lot of circumstance in people's lives. And so, for instance, in these risk assessments that I've studied, where you're trying to tell a judge, how likely are you to be arrested for a new crime if we release you before your trial? In other words, you've been arrested, you haven't been found guilty of anything yet. Traditionally, you were allowed to walk around and take care of your kids and do your job unless you are extremely dangerous to the public. So in a lot of states now, judges are using risk assessments to advise them on whether or not it's safe to release you. And, the problem is that, yes, there are people who are dangerous and who probably should be detained even before their trial, but they're very rare and they're hard to identify. And it's difficult to build an algorithm, an AI tool for this that doesn't recommend detention for a whole lot of people who aren't dangerous. And that's the problem, is that these things are of limited accuracy. That doesn't mean they're totally useless. It doesn't mean they're BS, but it means that we should take them with a big grain of salt.
I'm kind of shocked to find that some jurisdictions are using this technology in the court today. It seems like it quietly just got crept in there. Maybe there was one or two big companies hoping to profit off of their algorithm. They sold them to courts. Do you think the average person would be shocked to find this kind of stuff, maybe not Minority Report level, but this kind of stuff is being used in the criminal justice system today?
I don't know. I haven't been through the criminal justice system personally, so I keep learning more about it and how fractally complicated it is. And, to be fair, there are a number of states, including New Mexico, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, and others, Kentucky, that are trying to move away from using money to decide whether or not you should be released pretrial. So, like right now, we have 400,000 people held in local jails, even though they haven't yet been found guilty of any crime. And most of them are there because they were assigned a bail bond, we'll let you go if you can post a $2,000 bond, and they're there because they can't afford that. So that seems like a kind of weird way to figure out who should be allowed to walk free before their trial and who should be detained.
I feel like whether you had rich parents or you are rich yourself should not determine whether you make bail, right? I mean, that just seems fair.
Right. So the idea traditionally, although it's not actually that long a tradition, it's a 20th century phenomenon, that the more dangerous you are, the higher a money amount that the judge will assign to you. That's sort of a weird bank shot way of figuring out who should be detained and who shouldn't be. So, I mean, I think the idea of trying to assess, look, have you been convicted of serious crimes in the past? Have you avoided showing up to court in the past? In theory, using that and using some, statistics as a way of advising a judge about whether or not you're likely to show up to court and likely to obey the law in between now and then so that you can be safely released. That's not a crazy idea, and people have been doing that since long before computers have come along. What really concerns me is if we use a black box, as you said in your intro.
Yeah, like an opaque system where the input is all the factors and the output is a yes or no, and we don't know how it made the decision.
Exactly. We live in a society where, I have constitutional rights, you have constitutional rights, at least in theory. And if you are going to detain me, even before I've been found guilty of the crime of which I'm committed, of which I'm charged with, you had better have a darn good reason. And I deserve, as a defendant, a really thorough explanation of what it is about me or my record or my behavior which is contributing to that decision. So systems which are opaque or black box, which just says computer says no, computer says detain, that I really don't think is okay. And it's not just in pretrial. So AI tools of various kinds are being used all the way from law enforcement and prosecution to the pretrial stage, to forensic evidence during a courtroom trial. Incidentally, I think one of the problems with our system now is that a very small fraction of cases actually go to trial. It's almost always some kind of plea deal now, which often happens behind closed doors. But then, so forensic evidence through the trial, all the way to sentencing and then parole. So, the proponents of these systems, to be fair, argue that, hey, there's a long history of human decision makers in the justice system being biased. And, if you look at judges in the Jim Crow South and so on, right? I mean, there's a lot of bias there. And frankly, human beings are not that transparent either, right? Even to ourselves. If I say, well, I'm pretty sure you look like a dangerous guy, I might, the good thing about the justice system is I might have to write something down about that, but I can't necessarily understand my own psychological processes either. So the proponents of using AI say, well, look, at its best and most transparent, we could use AI to make these decisions more explainable and also measure it to see how accurate and how fair it is. The problem is that in practice, a lot of the AI systems that are being put out there, including by private vendors, are, as you say, they're opaque, they're proprietary. If you ask
They don't
them,
really explain their quote-unquote reasoning. They don't show how they made the decision.
Exactly. And if you ask the vendor, hey, what is going into this decision? They say, I'm not going to tell you. That's my intellectual property.
That's proprietary, corporate secret kind of thing. Is it my own bias that I prefer human bias and I prefer lack of human transparency than I do AI bias and AI lack of transparency? Which is to say, if a human made a lousy decision while I was at trial, I'd prefer that to an AI making a lousy decision.
Yeah, I mean, this is a deep philosophical question. I mean, we really believe in this individualized justice system, right? We're supposed to look at you as an individual. And AI, by its nature, is kind of fancy statistics, right? The whole idea of AI is to look at a ton of data, all of the documents on the web, or all of the defendants who were released over the past 4 years or whatever. And you look at that. You look at all of that and you try to find patterns. And then when you look at a specific person or a specific prompt on ChatGPT, you use the patterns you found in that data to try to predict the future, to say that what the next word ought to be, or to say whether you're going to commit more crime. And, there are a lot of things in life where that's a good approach. In a system where we care about your rights and your uniqueness as an individual, it's not obvious that that's a good approach. These systems, they know how many times you've been convicted in the past, because that's part of your criminal record. They don't know that you've posted pictures of yourself with a lot of guns on social media and that you've promised to finish the job if you're released. They also don't know that, you were convicted 15 years ago, but now you've turned your life around and you're in culinary school and you're taking care of your kid's sister. They don't know any of these individualized things about you that honestly make you more dangerous or much less dangerous than these statistics would suggest.
Well, these are big, meaty questions. I'm in favor of getting the robots out of the courtrooms, especially if they're not going to disclose how they made decisions. I'm glad you've grappled these questions with us, and I appreciate your time, Cris. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, David.
Cris Moore is a professor at the Santa Fe Institute. After the break, there is a free speech fiasco going on in the UK. Courts are silencing people. Graffiti artist Banksy got involved. And of course, that graffiti was censored by the courts. Details in a minute. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 50% off with minimum purchase plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
It is Pop Cultured Like Fungus. We are joined by pop culture historian, co-host of the Jan Arden podcast, reality TV enthusiast, Caitlin Green, who just was the host of this very show. Caitlin, Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. This is fun. Now I'm like back in my regular chair and I'm like, I can breathe a sigh of relief because I'm not the one stuck steering the conversation.
Yeah, you just filled in for me, I guess. And you actually gave me a gift while I was on vacation. You let me be a guest on my own show, which I've never done. And I really appreciate that. How was being at the helm of this very program?
It was good. I think because my background has been in podcasting and also in like a very different format for radio, it was an excellent challenge. It's so much talking. It's so much talking to so many different people in one show that you have your head on a swivel because you'll be preparing to talk about, therapy Thursday on a Wednesday with Gary, and then you'll all of a sudden move into the land of jobs numbers, and then you'll move into something like you have to just keep going through all these different paths. So that I really enjoyed.
It's a bit attention deficit disorder, like doing a show like this, because it's just a million things at once. I like that, but it can be very overwhelming, like figuring out what to say for 2 hours a day.
Totally. And trying to maintain some sense of difference between different guests, like trying to change your tone, but you want to still stay the same. This is very behind the scenes, inside baseball stuff, but like it's hard. Your gig is hard.
That instinct of like, as I'm saying it, will a listener care? It just kicked in for you. And that's always on your mind. There's a million things to manage. Let's talk about this Banksy thing. There's a mural that was made on a court by Banksy because of censorship. And then the government is now censoring that mural. What is going on? This is kind of an interesting story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great because what's happening is there's obviously so many protests happening around the world around the situation with Gaza and with Israel. So Keir Starmer, the UK leader, is being roundly criticized for, by many people's estimation, not doing enough in support of Palestine, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of people decide to go and protest in favor of Palestinian rights and sending them aid and all the things you're hearing about on the news all the time. Well, they get arrested. I think 600 plus people get arrested when they go there to protest. And they used sort of the cudgel of this terrorism law. And when you see the footage of these people, many of them are as they would say in the UK, they're pensioners. There's a guy in a wheelchair. There are veterans. There's grandparents. And you're watching them get dragged out, holding their little signs by the police. And it rubbed everyone very much the wrong way. It's created a huge uproar around this issue and around censorship because they're being arrested. So wouldn't you know it, Banksy decides, what am I going to do? I'm going to paint a mural on the side of the London Courts building about censorship. And it's a judge with his very UK wig on. And he's got a hammer and he's taking it to a protester. And it's graphic and big.
It is. And what's interesting is there's nothing even on the protesters' sign. So the content of all of this aside, whether it offends you, whether you're in support of it, the UK does not have a rich tradition of free speech like, I don't know, let's say the US. And it could be any protest. It could be anything that the government doesn't like. So this protest, graffiti, ends up on the court. What do? They then cover it up, which is so funny to me.
Yeah. So they cover it up with a big steel piece of scaffolding. But people still know where it is because it's already made the rounds on social. So everyone's showing up and they're taking photos of the steel scaffolding, which is then a commentary on censorship itself. Then people pull it back. They rip it off so that it's again revealed. So then the government sends two guys who kind of look like lethargic nightclub bouncers to guard it.
These two guards defending or, I don't know, protecting the covering of the mural, they could not have picked two worse people. They're just these big, kind of jacked, but maybe also overweight white dudes that have these smirks on their face. They just, of all the people to pick to guard this thing, these two guys are the doofiest I could imagine.
100%. And also they themselves and everyone who's now interacting with this piece of art is part of the art itself, which is what I love most about this story because they painted over it. So now they've painted over it, but they can't quite get all of it. So you still see the outline and the rough idea of what it is. That piece is now art. This is a real living example of protest and of art as it ties into protest. I just feel like they don't realize how much they are bringing attention to this and proving Banksy's point.
It reminds me of the Streisand effect. For those who don't know, There was like this erosion photographer who took a picture of Barbra Streisand's property on the coast of California, I think near Santa Barbara. There was maybe like 30 or 40 people who'd even viewed the webpage, but Barbra Streisand is like, well, I don't want a picture of my property on the internet. So she tries to get this picture taken down. This photographer is like, no, I'm just taking a picture of the coast. This is like, yes, your property's on there, but I'm allowed to take a picture of the coast. He shares the story, which then gets like millions of eyes on it. The photo gets in every major newspaper. But the lesson there is when you try to cover something up and then outrage happens, you're going to attract more attention to it than you would have had you not had tried to cover it up. And that's exactly what's happening with this Banksy art.
Precisely. And if they had have left it, sure, for a week, 2 weeks, people would have taken photos. I mean, it might perhaps longer because it's a Banksy, but I don't know. I mean, like you said, there's nothing on the sign. And I feel like they've really done a good job of proving his point. And that I don't know that they knew they were going to do that, but it's absolutely perfect considering what his intent was behind making this piece.
All right, let's talk, and I feel like I got to stop talking about this, having just been to the Burning Man event. That's where I was on vacation. It's a festival in the desert. But Caitlin, you had questions about some things that happened at this event. How would you describe the event? I have such trouble doing it. As a non-burner myself, and as someone who just reads about it in the news, it just kind of seems like a big dusty party that happens in the desert, and there's lots of weird people and there's not a lot of judgment, and so it's probably like a good time, but it also looks like logistically my nightmare. That's about right. There's some cool art as well.
Yeah. Some cool art.
Someone was given birth. That made no sense.
Someone was given birth.
Someone was given birth. English, how does it work? Nobody knows. Definitely not my first language. Just not sure what is. A baby was born there, and it was a cryptic birth, and it made national news. I'd like to think that it happened in one of those porta potties. I don't actually know where it happened.
Oh my
But a
gosh.
woman who didn't know she was pregnant gave birth at this event.
Yeah. And the thing that blew my mind, because I was waiting for them to release her age and say like she's 19 or something to that effect. The woman was 36 years old. And so I felt like very shocked by that, being a woman well over the age of 30 myself and who has a child. I don't know how you have a secret pregnancy. I just have so many questions for her. And did you not notice that perhaps you didn't have your monthly cycle for this long? Did you not notice that there was some like other forms of discomfort? I mean, maybe it was a particularly easy pregnancy. I have no idea. But to give birth, surprise, it's a baby in the middle of your Burning Man experience, raises many a question. And the baby, I think, had to be medevaced or taken away in a helicopter from the festival by itself because there wasn't enough room in the helicopter for the parents. So then they all would have had to go to Reno. Like, what are the nurses thinking? I have so many questions.
You know what? I was thinking these things happen, but then I realized, not having your period for 9 months is probably something most people would notice. But maybe this particular individual just wasn't great at listening to her body and was just surprised by it. Who knows?
Yeah. And then you're like, how did you not realize this? I need an interview with her. As someone who's given birth, I need to know what the birth experience was. Are you in a tent and people are all outside being like, yeah, man, and then you just hear a baby crying? Like, how did this break down?
Well, surprise, we have that woman here for you to talk. It's the Jerry Springer Show. Jerry, not funny. Caitlin, it's such a joy having you on the show, and thank you so much for filling in while I was on vacation. What a pleasure it was.
It was great. I'll do it anytime you want to go to Burning Man.
You can catch Caitlin Green on the Jan Arden podcast where she co-hosts. Caitlin, thank you again. Suppose one fire could have changed the course of history. Well, the Reichstag blaze, the fire in German parliament in 1933, did just that, ushering in a horrible dictatorship under the guise of a political emergency. But what lessons can we take from it today? That is our discussion on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Attention all small biz owners. At the UPS Store, you can count on us to handle your packages with care. With our certified packing experts, your packages are properly packed and protected. And with our pack and ship guarantee, when we pack it and ship it, we guarantee it, because your items arrive safe or you'll be reimbursed. Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Come into your local store today.
When the day is done, we're just getting started. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Given the day, given what's going on in the world, I hear a lot of political commentators talking about false flags. That's when a country attacks itself and blames someone else, a scapegoat. And I think the best example that I can think of is the Reichstag fire in 1933 in Germany. And we're going to talk all about that on Conspiracy Corner here with Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic, who co-hosts the Uncover Up podcast. He is alleged to be a non-alien. Nathan, welcome to the show.
And sometimes I get lazy and I do co-coast.
You do co-coast. That was a Freudian slip that I didn't even notice. Thank you for pointing it out. I have no response to that other than we're coasting here. We're coast to coasting? No, we're not the coast to coast. That's another radio program, probably.
No, we're something else.
Something else. Awkward pause. Okay, the Reichstag fire, that is the German parliament building that burned down in 1933. I'd always thought that it was maybe the Nazis doing it, or maybe they didn't do it, but the Nazis used it to sort of galvanize the population against an enemy that might not have actually burnt it. What happened, and what can we learn from it?
I mean, this story, unfortunately, is so crucial for a bunch of reasons. One, it was pivotal. What happened then was pivotal in shaping what happened in Germany in the 1930s and 40s when the country changed from a democracy to a genocidal dictatorship. But also we can find some parallels between what happened then and what continues to happen now. So it is important to look into this. So very briefly, it's 1933. Hitler has been appointed Chancellor of Germany after the Nazi Party ended up with the most seats in the German parliament after an election. But they still didn't have a majority, and Hitler's powers, they were limited by the laws in the Constitution of Germany. And these are like the most important functions of laws and constitutions to a degree, to rein in the power of potential dictators and authoritarians.
I mean, that's the hope, right?
That's what you hope for and what you sort of count on. Unfortunately, only a few weeks after Hitler becomes chancellor, something shocking happens, or something else shocking happens, which is, as you say, the Reichstag, the German parliament buildings, burned down. The people of Germany, understandably horrified and furious and frightened. And tragically, and historically, when a population is horrified and furious and frightened, they are easier to manipulate. Unfortunately, this means that political leaders who are trying to grab more power for themselves, they have an interest in making the population horrified, furious, and frightened. So after this fire, in order to stoke even more fear and suspicion, the Nazis claim that the fire is part of a plan by an enormous and sinister communist conspiracy, that this fire was only the beginning of a much larger attack, and it was going to be followed up by looting and terrorism, and then ultimately civil war. And those are all terrifying things. And so almost immediately after this, Hitler convinces the president of the time, von Hindenburg, to pass the Reichstag fire decree, which gives the Nazis permission to restrict the rights of personal freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, privacy of communications, all of these crucial things, all of these safeguards that keep a country free and prevent authoritarianism.
Isn't it interesting how we feel like we need expanded powers to deal with enemies? I mean, it happened after 9/11. I'm not necessarily calling 9/11 a false flag, but the Patriot Act that got passed in the U.S., a country gets attacked, and the government basically says we need a little more power to deal with it. Now, maybe that can be used for good. Maybe that extra power can be used to address the enemy, or maybe it can be used to turn into a horrible state like Nazi Germany in the 30s.
Yeah, and the Patriot Act is another example of that, an example of a government seizing a time when people were frightened, because when people were frightened, they're more willing to give up their freedom in exchange for the perception of safety.
And how often do governments give that power back to the people after they've grabbed it?
Yeah, again, almost never. And this power grab that the Nazis did after the burning of the Reichstag was vast and sweeping. They gave them the right to search homes without warrants, to arrest and detain people without proving cause. You know, again, these are really important things that you absolutely want to keep in your society. And unfortunately, this fear that was generated, it convinced people that this was a good idea. The communists were removed from politics, which allowed the Nazis to win a majority in the next election. It consolidated power because of this alleged emergency, and fundamentally changed that country into a dictatorship. And then once it's a dictatorship, all of the horrors of the 30s and the 40s could unfold.
Who was responsible for it? I mean, what do historians think? Do they think the Nazi Party burned down their own parliament? Do they think that someone else did it, but they just seized that event to sort of grab power? What's the thinking around what happened there?
It's such an important question. Because the thing is, there were communists in Germany at the time. There had been political violence on behalf of both sides, which of course is something that you never want to have in your society. But there was no evidence at all that there was some sort of sweeping communist conspiracy that was about to erupt in civil war. There wasn't even any evidence that the communists were behind the burning of the Reichstag. And so the Nazis clearly lied about the situation and manipulated it in order to cause more fear, in order to cause more terror. In fact, most historians now claim that the Reichstag fire was probably the work of just one person acting alone. He was a Dutch national living in Germany named Marinus van der Lubbe. And his reasons were personal. They were complicated. He had suffered a bad injury at work. He had been having a lot of physical problems. He had probably been suffering from some mental illness. But it was just the act of this one guy.
Whether or not there was this communist plot that the Nazis blamed to remove the communists from power, to pass this enabling act, to grab power, all that stuff, whether or not there was a plot or it was the act of one individual alone, the claim that it was a communist plot was sufficient for that power grab. And I think that's where we have to be careful here. A government claiming an action happened can sometimes be enough for them to grab power, whether that action happened or not.
Yeah, and that's why, because the Nazi Party benefited from this event, it's understandable why people would say, well, they must have also caused it. They must have been behind it. It must have been a true false flag. But, of course, a government doesn't have to cause a crisis in order to lie about it and take advantage of it. And this is probably more likely with the Reichstag. Rather than the Nazis burning it down themselves, they took something that happened and then just used it for their own purposes. And, of course, those purposes, as we saw, were horrific. And it's why there's a lot of lessons that I think we can take away from this event and the aftermath.
Well, Nathan Radke, in 2 minutes or less, let's go over some of these powerful lessons.
All right. First of all, people in power can use a crisis, whether they created it themselves or it's an external one that they had nothing to do with. People in power can use a crisis to grab more power. Because when people are frightened, they're more willing to give up their freedoms, and they're certainly more willing to give up other people's freedoms in the interest of perceived safety. So we need to be vigilant. Whenever it looks like people in power are trying to use unsupported claims as fear-mongering, whenever we see scapegoating going on from the higher-ups, scapegoating is a dangerously effective method to energize your supporters to mobilize against other groups of people. And a perceived shared enemy is a powerful motivation. And some true horrors can emerge when you have an angry, terrified, humiliated population who are looking for somebody to blame and somebody to punish.
This eerily mirrors a lot of what we see today.
And that's the tragedy of it, unfortunately. And it's easy to get swept up in like the conspiracy of it all. But we can't allow ourselves to get distracted by some of the noisy conspiracy stuff. We have to focus on what's actually happening in the halls of power. And even something like a democracy which feels like it could stick around forever, like it's carved in stone, this is not the case. And we can wake up in a world where our democracy has been badly damaged or even eliminated if we're not careful.
And you're not convinced we're living in that world today. Nathan Radke is here. It is Conspiracy Corner. Nathan, I asked that question and didn't let you answer because it was a meaty one. I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for being here.
Always have to be here.
Check out Nathan Radke's podcast, The Uncover Up. That's available wherever podcasts are downloaded freely because they're not sold. Okay, that is a wrap on the night show. Thank you so much for tuning in. On tomorrow night's show, married, single, young, old, people are having less sex than ever. A new study says we are in a sex recession. Don't miss our coverage on that. I am David Cooper, and this was The Last Show. I mean, for the evening. We'll be back tomorrow, like I said.
Doug. Limu and I always tell you to customize your car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. But now, we want you to feel it. Cue the emu music, Limu.
Save yourself money today. Increase your wealth. Customize and save, we say.
That may have been too much feeling.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.